Hello and welcome to Culture Club. My name's Rachel Strutt. I work at the Somerville Arts Council. And for today's episode, we are going to talk about collections and people who collect. We want to get at the obsession of collecting, why people collect, what they collect, and what is behind the passion. And we're going to start with Mr. Jesse Moos. Thank you so much for being on the show. Now, you work for the city, right?
I do. I am a city employee. I work for 311. If you call and get a male's voice, it's probably me.
Now, we were thrilled to walk into this room and see this staggering collection of action figures. Do you know how many you have?
I don't know. I would say at this point over 10,000.
10,000.
Yeah, there are a lot. I mean, there's small ones that just kind of intricately get into little crevices of the room. But yeah, I would say I probably have over 10,000 at this point.
And when did you start collecting, and when are your earliest pieces from?
I don't remember a time when I didn't collect. I mean, just as a kid, I grew up in the 80s, so, I always had G.I. Joe or He-Man or, Legos, Star Wars figures. So I don't really recall a time when I didn't have a collection of action figures.
Okay, so you started off as a kid playing with these figures, and then
Right.
it snowballed into something bigger.
Right.
Okay.
Like a room.
Well, 2 rooms.
Yeah, 2 rooms of action figures, yeah.
Okay. And why do you collect?
I just really appreciate them. I'm big into pop culture. The idea of having a 3-dimensional version of something you've seen on TV or in a cartoon, it really appeals to me. And I kind of like, creating my little dioramas, and, a lot of my friends really appreciate it and think it's kind of cool, and just always kind of done it.
Excellent. And now you were telling me that the figures always hark back to pop culture in some way. Can you give us some examples?
Sure. So, just like we're behind us here, there's a lot of like 80s pop, wrestlers, like kind of like, the time of like Hulk Hogan, early WrestleMania, we have like, Andre the Giant and the $1 Million Man, Ted DiBiase, the Big Boss Man, the Bushwhackers. These are things that, were important to me as a kid. And then, if I made good figures of them, a couple of years ago. So I felt like collecting them and, displaying them. So when other friends come over, they're kind of taken back to the same, time that I am when I see them. Mm-hmm. And they remember like, oh, I thought I had that guy, or I was into that.
So Jesse, you mentioned that some of your friends come over here and you enjoy reminiscing about the different figures or movies or comic books. Do you find that it's mostly men who collect action figures like this?
Yes, absolutely. I know very few women who actually collect action figures. It's just kind of like, a boy hobby, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you ever go to conventions?
No, because I'm totally embarrassed by going to a convention and seeing people who embrace this maybe more than I do with, wearing costumes or other stuff like that.
Got it. So your mania is slightly more controlled and
Yeah,
private. Okay,
right.
excellent.
That's why I've kind of kept in the room. A lot of my friends know that I, collect this stuff, but like I don't announce it to everyone. And now I am.
Excellent. Now, can you tell us about some of your action figures right here?
Sure. So this wall here is kind of my entire Star Wars collection for the most part. And it's really kind of divided up by films. For instance, this is Jabba's palace behind me. Below it is the Rancor, and you have Luke Skywalker about to battle him, and you have a few Grammarian guards there. And then it's kind of divided up by movie. So, like that's the New Hope characters, and then here's the Empire Strikes Back. But then right here we have Return of the Jedi, which is really my favorite of the 3.
So it sounds as if you have a clear vision in terms of how you curate this collection. And do you tend to spend a lot of time arranging all your figures?
Yes, very much so. Trying to figure out the perfect combination of where to fit these in. It's really just like a giant game of Tetris of like which shell's going to go over here, what display is going to go where. And I feel like I'm kind of where I want to be right now, but you never know. I might want to display something bigger than before.
Got it. Now, I know some collectors are very interested in the price and the value of their whatever it is they collect. Does that concern you? Like, for example, some people might leave the action figures in their packaging. Is that something that appeals to you at all, or is it for you more like visual? You want to be able to arrange them and...
I am definitely not. They're called mint on cards people who keep them in the collection or keep them in packaging. I don't do that. I like to, have them out, have them, displayed, arranged. I know people do collect for value, and I know these are valuable, but that's not why I collect. I collect for the love of, the actual toy and not for, someday I'll sell this and make a lot of money.
Well, that seems more pure, I think.
Yeah, a pure collector.
Definitely. And what actually defines an action figure? Like, how are these different than dolls, for example?
Sure. I mean, what divides an action figure from a doll is that dolls have to have rooted hair. So, like, a Barbie is a doll because of the rooted hair, or an action figure, it's something called plastic hair, even for a female. Of course, the Ken doll is always the dividing line of, is it an action figure, is it a doll? But you get to dress it up. So I guess that kind of also makes it a doll. Mm-hmm. And you also have to have articulation. So like it has to move arms and legs. Otherwise it'd be a statue.
Got it. And the material is always plastic?
Yeah, always plastic.
So, Jesse, with this many figurines, I'm really interested in how you organize, how you curate your collection. Can you give us a little tour?
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to pass you the mic.
Thanks. Hi. Okay, so this is one wall, and this is kind of the Marvel wall. So we have our Spider-Mans and our X-Men, Wolverines, and our Fantastic Four characters. Behind me is also some more Marvel as well. It's just kind of like some various stuff. We have Street Fighter action figures. Above there, you got Galactus, and you have Giant Man and Spawn and Max. On this wall here, this is kind of the movie little shelf here. You have some Kill Bill figures, you got Die Hard, you got Predator and Aliens, American Psycho figure, RoboCop, of course, Reservoir Dogs, if you see those. And then up here, this is my G.I. Joe shelves, and they started kind of making these again about maybe 6 or 7 years ago. So these are not the original figures. These are kind of the better ones with more articulation, and they're just better figures in general. If we want to go over to here, this is a lot of Lego stuff. Lego's really been getting a lot of cool licenses lately. They've had Star Wars for a while, but they've really taken it to the next level. For instance, this is like the Lego Jabba's palace, which is the palace of my dreams. You have Jabba in here, and you have the Rancor just hanging out at the bottom, as well as, you have Luke Skywalker here, you have Chewbacca, a bunch of Gamorrean guards. It's just a really cool little playset here. As we go further in, as we saw this. So this wall here is my He-Man wall, and I'm really a big He-Man fan since I was a little kid, and I kind of just arranged them by, they got the He-Man family, then we have, good guys and bad guys. If you go see behind me, we have a lot of DC characters. These are the bad guys. We have another little Star Wars Cantina playset right there. Various DC heroes, Green Lanterns up there. This wall here is kind of the modern version of the classic Superpowers action figures. And I kind of have them arranged by, heroes and bad guys as well. So this is kind of just the whole DC wall. Then you got all my Batmans. You got like the 1960s Batmans and kind of the modern Batmans and all the Batman villains. Catwoman and Bane and Clayface, Scarecrow. And let me take you to the second room. There's two. So this here is the more wife-friendly part of my collection. And here we have, classic Simpsons figures. We got Homer, but you also have like various characters. You have, Uncle Herb, or, Stonecutter, or, Hank Scorpio, one of my favorites. This shelf is kind of dedicated to like Tim Burton movies. We have the Nightmare Before Christmas figures here. We got Beetlejuice and Edward Scissorhand. Here are my Beatles Yellow Submarine figures. We have Where the Wild Things Are here. Futurama, Ren and Stimpy. Got Bugs Bunny. Then these two bottom shelves are all Muppets. Various from the Muppet Show, from Sesame Street. One of my favorite lines with this one came out, mid 2000s. Really just well-made, detailed figures. One of my favorites.
Now, Jesse, your collection is already sprawling and very impressive. What is the future of this collection? Will you ever run out of room, for example?
I basically will probably just kind of keep it to this room and the second room, because if I was to expand any more, I'd probably get divorced. Basically, to get the second room was a big negotiation with my wife, but she happily gave part of it to me. But she appreciates what's in there. I mean, there's a lot more stuff that she also likes, like the Muppets. She loves the Muppets, and she loves the Simpsons and music figures. So this room is kind of like stuff that I like, and that room is stuff we kind of both like. So that's the compromise.
Got it. Sounds like a good deal. Jesse, thank you so much for sharing your collection with us.
Oh, thank you for coming. Happy to have you.
Hi, I'm Vera from the Somerville Arts Council, and we're here today with June Erlick. June, why don't you tell us a bit more about yourself first?
Hi, I'm June Carolyn Erlick, and I work at the David Rockefeller Center for Latin American Studies in Cambridge, and I edit a magazine called Revista.
And we're here today because you have this incredible collection of masks. When did it all start, and what's the story?
Oh, well, I never thought for many years that I actually had a collection. It all began when I lived in Colombia, and at a handicrafts fair, I saw an amazing wooden mask from the southern part of Colombia. And then I decided I was going to travel to that town. It's a town where called Sibundoy, and it actually has a festival of reconciliation. That's what it's mostly known for. And I traveled there a few times and bought masks. And then whenever I was in a place, a handicrafts fair, I would buy masks, and every mask has a different expression, a little bit different coloring. And so people started to think that I had a collection of masks, and they began to give me masks from different places. That since they were giving me masks from different places, that whenever I went to different places, I started to buy masks, and that's how the mask collection grew. I now have about 55 masks.
And where are they mainly from? Still Latin America, or what different countries?
They're mainly, I'd say, Colombia, Mexico, Guatemala, but I also have from Bolivia, from Thailand, from Indonesia, from Vietnam. My brother, who loves to travel, keeps me well stocked, and people know to buy me masks.
And what do you love in particular about masks?
They're very expressive, and they convey emotions. Especially if you look at the masks from Sibundoy, it's all basically the same type of face, a male face with long bangs, and yet every single one of them conveys a different emotion. I used to have them in a different apartment, hung in a hall that I had to go through on my way from my bedroom to my bathroom. And in the morning, I would look at them and I would say, what mood am I in today? Am I like this guy, or am I this guy, or am I like this guy? And I love them also because I give a lot of parties and I entertain a lot. And it's a really easy way when people don't know each other just to kind of break the ice.
And any mask that has a particular story?
Other than the ones from Sibundoy, this one here, which is from the Huichol region of Oaxaca, of Mexico, and it's made all of tiny little beads. And I wasn't familiar with this type of mask, and I went into a museum here in the United States, and I saw this incredibly beautiful mask. And I usually don't buy, one of my sort of informal rules to myself is I will buy at handicraft fairs, but I don't buy in stores, and I don't buy in museums, and I don't buy masks from places where I haven't been. Gifts are different. And so I thought, no, but this is too beautiful. So I went and I looked at the price, and it was $800. And I won't pay $800 for a mask. I may be I may have a collection, but not in that sense. And I thought, and this museum was not especially known for, huge jacked up prices. And I was talking to a friend of mine, a graduate student at Harvard, and I said to her, I really feel sad because I fell in love with this mask, and it's, but it's just so expensive, and I'd never seen one like it before. And she goes, "Oh, I have a friend who's a Fulbright fellow in that region. I'll write her." And so as it turns out, this Fulbright fellow was actually working with craftspeople with a cooperative. And so she wrote back and she said, "Well, I'd be glad to send one, but, it's very, very, very expensive." And I thought, oh, here we go again. And I go down further in the email, and she said, "I'm going to have to ask you if you really want it for $70, but that includes the shipping." So that is I've been a Fulbrighter twice, and I consider this my Fulbright mask.
That's a great story. Any mask that actually has been used?
This one right here has been used not by me. A friend of mine was going to a costume party for Halloween, and he asked if he could borrow it, and he did. And so it's been used then. Actually, a lot of these masks are not use masks. For example, the Sibundoy people do not use these masks over their face. They're wood, they're heavy, they're more ornamental than they are to put over your face.
Well, thanks, June, so much for having us here.
Oh, you're so welcome.
Hello. So I am here at the Scat TV studios with John Roderick, a lifelong resident of Somerville and an avid collector. Can you tell me a little bit about what you collect? I'm particularly interested in your Railroadiana collection.
I collect a little bit of everything, actually. It's Railroadiana is I guess that's a kind of a broad term that covers railroad history items and so on, and that's a main focus of interest in my collecting, my hobbies. But
any particular railroad that interests you?
I was brought up in Somerville, of course, and the local railroad we had here was the Boston and Maine, and that's pretty much the one that I'm the most interested in. It's a provincial thing, I guess. Yeah.
And you are also a collector of postcards. So there's a connection between your love of railroads and how they used to deliver mail with postcards.
Yeah, I postcards, pictures, things, items of ephemera, I guess, is the broad term to use, the general term. But postcards in particular, and there are a few reasons for that. Postcards, of course, are pictures, and a picture's worth 1,000 words, and there were a lot of postcards produced in the period from about 1900 to 1920 or so. Mm-hmm. And it so happens that was a really interesting time in the history of the railroad, and actually in the history of the country. Mm-hmm. And the collecting of postcards for me sort of started out onesies and twosies with some railroad ones and so on, train stations and whatnot, and eventually it just sort of mushroomed or blossomed into a lot of other things. But in particular, I started probably as a teenager collecting Somerville public buildings, or I guess that's the best way to describe it. And I found that just by accident that there were a lot of postcards of different schools, municipal buildings, obviously squares, cityscapes and so on. And they're really fascinating to look at because you can see at once how much the city has changed and really how much it stayed the same, which is kind of fun. And a couple of years ago, I scanned a lot of them and put them on my Facebook page.
How many do you have, by the way? How many postcards do you estimate?
It's in the hundreds. There are collectors that have in the tens of thousands. But the reason for the ones I have is, I've focused on mostly a fairly narrow area, and Somerville and environs. So that's why that came about. But there's there were pictorial history of the city. I guess we could talk about them in particular. Let's see. Woodbridge Inn is kind of a cool place. This was in Davis Square. It's where Champa Manor is today. It burned around 1979, but I remember it as a kid, going in there during holidays and so on for meals and whatnot. And it was a hotel. And it's kind of interesting today that there's a lot of talk of putting a hotel in Davis Square again.
We need a hotel.
Well, I think back to the Woodbridge Inn days, and obviously that's, and then there were other things about it that I won't talk about right now, but that's, it is what it is.
Okay, what do we got here? Now, this looks like Gilman Square, is that correct?
Yeah, that is actually. That's the Winter Hill station, the train station, and in the background is the hill that the high school's on, of course, and that is probably from about 1910.
What a beautiful little train station. And I'm interested in this area of Gilman Square and Winter Hill because, of course, this is where the Green Line will be going through again.
Yeah, Gilman Square has always been a crossroads, I guess, if you will, an important place. And in fact, when it was served by railroad, by passenger trains, it was served by 40 or 50 trains a day. So it was pretty busy place.
Now, tell me about this postcard. This is a postcard, a good old-timey looking postcard that people could customize?
They're kind of generic postcards and stuff that they didn't really have anything in particular that portrayed the place that the readings were coming from. Mm-hmm. But remember, postcards served as a means of people communicating in brief notes and so on before things like texts and emails and whatever, actually in some cases before telephones.
And now that technology is changing so much and we communicate so differently, is that making postcards more valuable?
Well, that's hard to say. Value is usually in the hands of the beholder. The person, they assign value themselves. Mm-hmm. Sometimes the market does if it's an exceedingly rare image, I guess. By their nature, postcards tended to, some got thrown away, got destroyed or whatever. But many, of course, got kept, and that's, unfortunately for me, that's how it ended up. Incidentally, this all sort of started, like I say, when I was in high school, I guess around that time. And, I'd see different images that just caught my eye of things at flea markets or whatever. And my parents picked up on that, and they started, giving them to me. I'd get, a handful of them at Christmas or, for my birthday or whatever, as gifts. And then from there, it just sort of started to snowball. And then when eBay came about, then that's a whole universe because now it really showed me the depth and diversity of images that are available, out there that people have.
Now, your collection of Somerville postcards is obviously very strong. Could you say you have the world's foremost collection of Somerville postcards?
I very much doubt it.
Really?
There are some really, I've got a lot, and I'm just accumulated a lot, but I very much doubt that I have the biggest collection. I have heard tell that, for instance, there was a postcard done for every school in the city. I have a number of them from that era, from the early 1900s. I have a number of them, but there are also some that I don't have, but I'm told that exist. Uh-huh.
And might you be able to find them on eBay?
Eventually, I hope to.
Yeah. So it sounds like the city today, for example, we promote ourselves through our website, through TV promotion, through our festivals. It sounds like back in the day, postcards were a way of promoting the city.
Pretty much, yeah. In anything really. That was, it was the medium.
Now these look really old. Can you tell us a little bit about this? What we're looking at?
The images of the E.A. Bailey's store, which was on the corner of Marshall and Pearl Street, excuse me.
So again, the Gilman Square area.
It's Gilman Square, yes. And at the time, it was the only, and for many years, it was the only structure on that block. The entire, from there over to Stickney and out to School Street and so on, was just a field. It was a pasture, I guess, whatever. But in particular, what's fun with this picture is it's a stereopticon card. If you had a viewer, they have these little binocular viewers that you can actually see them almost in 3D. It's kind of a stereo.
Very cool.
Yeah. There were two pictures that were taken with a very slight offset, and as a result, it creates two images that your eyes see as one.
Interesting. I think I've looked through one of those contraptions before. So your collection not only chronicles Somerville history, it also chronicles the history of media as well.
Well, yeah, by extension of that, it does. Yeah, and I always thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, definitely. And what about a couple of your more modern postcards? Like I see you have a lot of postcards of a plane.
Yeah, I brought these down today. It's a personal thing. It comes under the general heading of transportation and stuff, and transportation history. But at one time in New England, we had an airline called Northeast Airlines. And Northeast was originally Boston and Maine Airways. It was created by the B&M Railroad in the 1920s. Among the things that I remember as a kid, and my my classmates and so on, kids that grew up, my contemporaries, we remember seeing the Yellowbirds, and that was like their trademark aircraft. And
Yeah, it's a pretty snazzy paint job.
It was, for its time, and even I think by today's standards, it's still pretty sharp looking. It was designed by a guy named Raymond Loewy, who was a very famous mid 20th century industrial designer, and he designed the Studebaker. There were different things that he was the envisioner of and stuff, and the Yellowbird scheme was one of them, and it became a trademark of what I always thought was our own New England airline, and it was just kind of cool to see that. And,
Very nice. Now, I want to ask you about a few of my favorite postcards that I've checked out. Let's start with this one. That is such a gorgeous piece of architecture.
That is the original Somerville Public Library. It was not a Carnegie library, but it was located pretty much where the west wing of the high school is today, across from City Hall. It was, I guess, a Richardson-esque building. That's about the closest description I could give of it.
And that's about like 1880?
Yeah, around that time. Yeah, around the turn of the century. There's a similar building in Woburn that houses the Woburn Public Library. It's about the closest I've seen locally that shows how that looked.
Now this I love because it looks so different than it does today. What are we looking at here?
That is what we call Foss Park. It was called Broadway Park at the time, and it had a large pond. And remember now the Fells Way and so on, all the roadways that went by that was part of Frederick Law Olmsted's Emerald Necklace, exactly. And that's, so that was kind of a feature that was part of all.
And is that a fountain in the middle?
Yeah, it was a man-made fountain. I'm not really sure if those were like concrete sculpture type things or whatever. There were a few places in the city that had those from that period, and they were like these sort of like man-made rocks. They were kind of bizarre looking, but I guess it was, just the thing of the times.
Interesting. And again, this is just a gorgeous piece of architecture. What are we looking at?
That is Somerville Highlands Depot. That was at where Lexington Park is today. That was a Boston and Lowell structure that was built around in the 1890s, and it was obviously a stone structure. The stone from that particular building was reused to build the field house at Tufts Park today. But in the background is Lexington Ave, and of course in the foreground is what was the Arlington and Lexington Branch Railroad.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your collection. Have you ever put your collection on display in any way in town?
Not really. As I say, in my Facebook page, it's I've got a lot of the images scanned and presented in different albums and so on. And I did that mostly as a living history endeavor, so that people, that would see it would talk about it, would comment and so on, because everyone has their own unique memory or story to tell. And I thought it would be a really good medium, a really good way to get that together and sort of preserve history as well, in some small way.
Well, thank you so much for coming in and sharing your collection with us.
Thanks. It's been fun.
We'll see you on the next episode of Culture Club.